Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. Welcome, Jayka.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I'm so excited to talk to you, but first I'd like to introduce you to our audience. So
Yes.
everyone, this is my friend Jayka Duncan. Jayka was diagnosed with recurrent breast cancer in December of 2016. Decided to follow her intuition this time, which did not include the use of Western medicines. And after trying many holistic methods, the cancer gained ground. That was October 2018, right?
Yes.
And that brought you to your knees, which you're going to share more about.
Yes.
Jayka finally surrendered. And through a daily practice of surrender, which she is absolutely going to tell us about today, she was able to heal her stage 4 cancer in less than 4 months. She's now going to share all of that with us. And she shares that routinely on her podcast, in her blog. She just published a book, Healed by Cancer, which we're going to learn more about too. And Jayka's mission is to help people learn how to surrender in order to make room for their own healing. So welcome, Jayka.
Thank you, Kristin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And just because some people who are watching this might be expecting to hear about complex, chronic, medically mysterious illness, a lot of people wouldn't consider cancer a mysterious medical illness. But what would you say to those people? Why is this talk relevant to them?
Well, the way I see it is that cancer was a symptom for me. And when I put the microscope on myself and got to really dig deep and figure out what made me tick at a subconscious level, and then surrendered everything that came up, I healed my body. So I realized that, okay, cancer was my symptom. For someone else, it could be MS or ALS or heart disease or a mysterious illness. And it is also my belief that all disease starts at an emotional level, and it likely started decades ago. And that certainly was the case for me.
So take us back to the beginning. I want to hear from you again, just what you went through and what.
Okay. So I was raised in the Netherlands by a beautiful mom who had cancer when she was 37 years old. And I was 8 years old at the time. Many well-meaning people said to me, oh, this is genetic. You better get yourself tested lots once you're an adult. And so unbeknownst to them, they instilled fear in me. I was also told by a person in the village where I lived, people die from cancer. And so this instilled more fear in me. And I then also had a father who was very intimidating and narcissistic and bullied me. And so all of this, and I immigrated to Canada from the Netherlands. So all of these things happened in my childhood, which programmed me in a way that ended up giving me a cancer-causing identity. The immigration to Canada, I was 13 years old. I now realize that more than likely I struggled with depression, and I would have crawled back to the Netherlands if they'd let me. I didn't speak English, although that rectified itself pretty quickly, but I just didn't fit in. And so I felt unheard, unseen, unloved, unacknowledged, and then coupled that with a father who was the way that he was because of his environment and, his generational baggage. And I created all these programs. And these programs were they stuck with me even beyond my teenage years. Even when I left, my parents' home, I continued these programs where underneath these programs and underneath all of my behaviors was fear. And fear of rejection came up over and over and over again. As I was putting the microscope on myself in all areas, I was a workaholic because I felt that I needed to prove myself. If I wasn't proving myself, I wasn't worthy. I was a people pleaser extraordinaire because I thought if I don't do what people want me to do, they're going to reject me. I struggled with an eating disorder because I thought if I'm not fit and if I'm not skinny, people will reject me, and on and on and on. And so all of these activities that I did, all of this behavior that I did had an undercurrent of fear. And as you probably know, fear is a very low vibration. And so for decades, since my teenage years or even younger, my body at a subconscious level vibrated at that level of fear. And I created a perfect storm because there was already that fear of cancer and the fact that everybody said it's genetic and, I'm predisposed to it. And voila, I ended up with cancer. And I realized I had always been fit. I had always been slim. I had never been a smoker, not a big drinker. I was, in a happy marriage. And so all the things that people said makes you more prone to get cancer wasn't the case for me. And so I realized that it likely had to do with my emotional state of being. And when I was told in October 2018 that the cancer had spread, so I had now tumors in my breast, in my cervix, and in my uterus, like you mentioned, it brought me to my knees. And I remember sitting in meditation, and I had been an avid meditator for quite a few years. And I remember in meditation saying, I don't know what to do anymore. I was devastated. I'm like, what else do I need to do? Show me. And those words, show me, something shifted in me. And I realized that I needed to stop doing, and I needed to pay more attention to my state of being. And then every single day for 3 hours, sometimes more, sometimes up to 5 hours a day, I would go in meditation, and I created this surrender practice where I allowed myself to feel. So many of us in society are taught not to feel. It's not appropriate to feel anger or to feel fear or to feel shame. And so we stuff it down and stuff it down and stuff it down. And it festers. And so I finally allowed myself to feel the anger that I had towards my father, the anger that I had towards my body letting me down. I mean, I'd had cancer twice in my life before the age of 50. I allowed myself to feel the fear of death and dying. I allowed myself to feel shame, and on and on and on. And lo and behold, as I was letting go of these emotions and the limiting beliefs, I realized that I didn't feel worthy. If someone had said to me 5 years ago that, oh, you don't feel worthy, I would have said, no, I do. And I do lots of nice things for myself. I exercise and I go on vacation. I do this and that. And I realized as I was surrendering that at a deep level, I did not feel worthy. And a lot of it also had to do with being female, being raised by a somewhat chauvinistic father. And I think the whole collective female energy adds to that as well. And so as I was letting go of these limiting beliefs of I'm not good enough, and I'm not smart enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, and I let all of that go, I surrendered it all in December. So about 6 weeks after I started this practice, I was in India. So while all this was happening, I was traveling around the world. That had been one of our dreams, my husband and I. And we decided we're not going to let cancer stop us from living our dream. My mother never got to retire, so let's do this. Let's travel the world. So I was in India in December of 2018. So about, like I said, 6 or 7 weeks after I started the surrender practice. And at one point, I was not in meditation, but I remember just going about my day, and I all of a sudden felt incredible love for myself. And this love was so tender and so gentle that it just melted my heart. It's the kind of love that you would feel for a little baby. And I felt that for me. And I had never felt that for me. Because what I had realized in my surrender practice, that my father wasn't the problem. Immigration wasn't the problem. No one was the problem. The problem was that I didn't love myself. I didn't see myself as worthy. And that had started to change. And the way I describe it is that we have all these limiting beliefs of I'm not good enough and I'm not smart enough and all of that. And it blocks us from our true self, our essence, which is this pure, beautiful love and this compassion and tenderness. And when I started to let go of all of those beliefs, I started to reconnect with me, with the truth of who I truly am. And that's where that beautiful love came from. And I still feel that today. I can still tap into that today. And the other part of that is so amazing is that I can now think of my father. He passed away in September, and we didn't really resolve things, so to speak, before he passed away. I did on my end, but he wasn't able to resolve it on his end. But I think of my father now, and I can sense him beyond his ego. And so my vibration has raised to a point now that I'm no longer feeling the victim. I'm no longer feeling overwhelmed by his intimidation or anything. I feel nothing but love and compassion and tenderness for him, because I now realize that his behavior was also based out of fear. He was a bully because in his childhood, he was raised by a father who was abusive. He was bullied at school, and then he became the bully. So he was afraid that if he didn't throw the first punch, that he would then be under attack. And so that little child in him, and that's really what all of this is. It's about, a surrender practice is about acknowledging your inner child. Because all of these programs that I had created had mostly been created in my childhood, and I didn't feel seen or heard or acknowledged or loved. And so in my surrender practice, I continually said, I love you. I see you. I hear you. I acknowledge you. And so it's about embracing you. And then I also realized that I didn't need fixing. None of us need fixing. We are all beautiful just the way we are. The issue is that we don't accept ourselves the way we are. And that's where all the blocks are. And so when you start to embrace yourself and love yourself unconditionally, it's bliss. It is absolutely bliss. And so the fact that I have a cancer-free body is amazing, absolutely amazing. And I'm grateful for it. But this state of bliss is so much more. And so I'm at a point now where I think if the cancer comes back, it's okay. Because I'm in this beautiful state of being that I'm no longer attached to, the need for a healthy body or the need for a fit body or anything. I'm just really at peace with who I am and the way life is going. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is.
Such an awesome story. And I have like 1,000 questions for you. But
okay.
I'm trying to think about the ones that people will most likely maybe want to be asking. So the first one I have is, are you still doing this practice every day? Are you still sitting with yourself, cultivating? How long does it take you?
So at this point, I've kind of gotten pretty good at it. And so I meditate every single day. Every morning I meditate. And I started off with show me. And a lot of times nothing comes up. And so I'm just at peace and I just do my regular meditation. And that is because I surrender throughout the entire day. So the number one most important aspect of a surrender practice is awareness. And this is what I teach my clients. Because if you're not aware, of what needs, of who you are, then you're not aware of what needs letting go. So that's the number one step. And so I am in awareness throughout the whole day, and I catch all of these limiting thoughts and emotions and beliefs as they come up. And that is really the best time to let them go, is right in the moment. And so the minute it comes up, I'm aware of it. And that awareness, so the thought comes from the ego, right? The limiting belief comes from the ego. The minute you become really present with it and you become aware of it, that awareness is actually your higher self. And the way I describe it is the limiting belief is kind of like the darkness inside of you. The awareness is the light. And so you're shining the light on the darkness. You're telling yourself, it's okay that I feel, whatever it is, that whatever limiting belief, that I feel that I'm not skinny enough, let's say. It's okay that I feel that. I love you. It's okay. You're allowed to feel that. I acknowledge you. I see you. I hear you. And so this witness, this higher consciousness just keeps, dousing this limiting belief with compassion, with love, with patience. And it dissipates really quickly at this point. When I was healing myself of cancer, I was, like I said, I was spending 3 hours, 4 or 5 hours a day in meditation. And that wasn't all meditating. That wasn't all surrendering. And so if you'd like, I can explain it a little bit.
Yeah, that was my next question.
And so what I would do is whatever was the freshest within me. So let's say this fear of dying from cancer. That was a pretty major one. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live and see my kids get married and have children and all, I still have lots of plans in life. And so I would allow myself to think, what if it's okay that I died from cancer? And that question would bring up all kinds of resistance. My ego would be like, no, that's not okay. And fear would come up and anger would come up, and, and so then I would allow myself to feel the fear and allow myself to feel the anger. And I would really rev it up, because I had to teach myself to feel these things, because I had been so brilliant at stuffing it down. I played the avoidance. Many of us do, we avoided, many of us will surf the internet or, reach for food or alcohol or whatever, shopping, right? So that we avoid those feelings. And so I had to teach myself to feel again. So I would rev it up and really allow myself to be really angry. And as soon as I felt it be like a 10 out of 10, or sometimes an 8 out of 10, then I would become the witness. And I would tell myself, it's okay. It's okay that you're feeling this. You're allowed to feel this. I see you. I hear you. I acknowledge you. It's okay. And sometimes it would take 5 minutes. Sometimes it would take half an hour. Sometimes it would, it would ebb and flow, or I would feel myself relax, and then something else would come up, and then I would be okay with that. And then there would be, yeah, but what if? And then I would surrender that and be okay with that. And then when I felt myself 100% okay with the limiting belief, so in this case, my fear of dying and all the fear and the anger that I had surrendered, and I could feel my body relax, and I could feel all the tension leave, and it was like 1,000 pounds was lifted off my shoulders. And then I would visualize myself vibrantly healthy. And I had this visualization where I was hiking. I love hiking. I love nature. And because we had been traveling through Asia, we had ran into a few tourists that had hiked to base camp. And so you hire a Sherpa to carry your backpack, and they showed incredible pictures of the mountain ranges in Nepal. And I was just in awe. And at that time I had adrenal fatigue so bad. Like if I could walk, a half a mile, I'd be lucky. And so my visualization was for me to hike with a Sherpa, and I had, I'd see the mountains, and I was hiking day after day. And then the most important component was that I would feel as if it had already happened. And so I would allow myself to feel the gratitude and the freedom and the joy. And I would then bathe myself in those high vibrations of the joy, the love, the freedom, the gratitude. And I realized that those were the higher vibrations where the healing was happening. Our inner healer is vibrating at that high level. And so I would bask in that for an hour and a half, however long, and just be in total bliss. And I did this day in, day out, day in, day out. And then also surrendering any expectations. Because when we have expectations, there's often desperation attached. So in my case, I surrendered all expectations of what the surrender practice would give me. So I had no idea that I was healing my body, really. I was just kind of doing what felt right. And it was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful thing. And so now occasionally something will come up that is, has some significant energy. And so then I surrender in meditation. But most often, I just keep surrendering through the day. The minute I become aware, I stop, I become very present, and I tell myself it's okay. Because when you're 100% okay with all of your thoughts, all of your beliefs, all of your actions, all of your reactions, when you're 100% okay with everything, it's bliss. That's bliss. That's when you are at peace with yourself. And so surrendering literally brought all of, shining the light on the limiting beliefs and kind of beckoning up, say, it's okay, come join me up here, it's okay. And once the limiting belief is up here, it dissipates because you're okay with it. And so when I had surrendered the fear and the anger around dying from cancer, I got to a point where I could think about dying and I wasn't triggered. Mm-hmm. And so if any of the viewers, let's say they have an issue with weight gain and they want to lose 50 pounds, I would recommend that they first surrender that need, let go of the desperation, and then get to a point where it's like, if I lose 50 pounds, great. If I don't lose 50 pounds, that's okay too. If I gain 50 pounds, that's okay too. At that point, you realize that our body doesn't define us. That's not who we are. And it's powerful. It's a very powerful practice.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this at this point are like, I want what she's having. That sounds really nice. And I don't want to take us out of that higher vibration, but at the risk of doing so, there's a piece in here that I keep getting curious about, which is, how did the people around you who love you and are well-meaning and want the best for you and are probably dealing with, or were dealing with, their own fears about whether you'd recover or not, and their own concerns about the choices you were making, and maybe not doing 5 hours a day of sitting meditation and release and surrender, right? Maybe not doing our work. How was that for you, that interface with the people who maybe didn't understand?
Right. So I was lucky because only my husband was with me. We were traveling around the world. People didn't know me. And I realized that was also a huge benefit, because the thing is that with our programming, people have expectations of who you are. And so they project that towards you. And then that's why, someone who, for example, goes and an alcoholic goes to a clinic and becomes sober and then goes back into his environment, often ends up drinking again because of expectations of other people and projections and whatever. And I didn't have that, because I traveled for 15 months around Mexico, around Europe, around Asia, and people didn't know me. So I was able to recreate. I was able to let go of the Jayka identity, right? And so I realized most people are not going to, just take off for a year and a half. And I also understand, yes, like 3 hours, 4 hours a day is a lot. And everyone is able to surrender. Everyone can do this in their own time, at their home, and what I recommend for my clients is to let their loved ones know that, okay, I'm doing this surrender practice. I want to recreate myself, reprogram myself. All of these emotions are going to be brought up to the surface. And so it may seem that I have personality disorder for a while, because that certainly was the case for me. My husband, he was my rock, and he was a saint because he put up with quite a bit.
You're talking about the wailing and the gnashing of teeth that came from the spare bedroom or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, just, because I would release something in meditation, right? And in my surrender meditation. And then sometimes in the afternoon, let's say, something else was triggered. So there was another layer. And I had gotten to a point where I was no longer able to stuff things down. And so I was having to deal with it right then and there. I was the most even-keeled person in the world because my programming was to not ever rock the boat and just go with the flow and do what people wanted, right? And so I went from this even-keeled person to, I would all of a sudden in the mid-afternoon, I'd start crying, or I would get angry, and I'm like, what is going on? And it kind of felt like I was taking 2 steps forwards and 10 steps back. But it was literally just all of these emotions that were stuck in my body that were coming up to the surface. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, my husband was well aware that I was surrendering all the time, and we were just kind of going with the flow. And so that's number one. I would recommend people let your loved ones know that things may get a little weird around, and also to not have them comfort you. Mm-hmm. Because if you're crying, and let's say your husband comes over and gives you a big hug, that the emotions are being subdued, and you don't want that. You want the emotions to be there so you can finally let it go. Mm-hmm. And so telling your loved ones, I may be crying, I may be angry, don't try to make me feel better. Don't comfort me. And so if they have a need to comfort, they're going to have to surrender that need, let go of that need, and allow you to fully feel and release it. Yes. And then, for some people it can be like that. For other people, it can take months or years, or it may never happen, and surrender any expectations. Let go of any expectations. Yeah. So
what I'm hearing is really just be willing to accept whatever comes up in yourself and love yourself regardless.
Love yourself unconditionally. That's the key, unconditionally. And so if you're thinking, this isn't going fast enough, if you're being impatient and this isn't working, become the observer of that. See, it's okay that I have this feeling, this thought that it's not working. It's okay. I love you. It's okay. I hear you. And then if you're like, oh my God, I'm too tired, that's okay too. And so whatever thoughts, because that's all resistance. That's your ego resisting. Right? Because it's uncomfortable. Surrendering is uncomfortable. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because the thing is that we are the way that we are because we're comfortable with it. Right? And so when you surrender and you start to step outside of your comfort zone, you're no longer guided by your ego. You start to be guided by your higher self. And so this is going to be uncomfortable. For example, for me, fear of rejection was basically the undercurrent of most of my behavior. I wrote this book, and as I was, getting to know myself and meditating, I often get messages through meditation from my higher self. And I promised myself about 2 years ago that I would trust my intuition. And so this book that I wrote, my intuition, my higher self said to me in meditation, write about your secrets. And I was like, no, nobody needs to know about that. I've surrendered it. And my inner voice said, write about it. And I was like, oh, are you kidding me? Okay. So I wrote about it. And sure enough, I hadn't fully surrendered it because all of these discomforts were coming up, And so I wrote about my eating disorder. I wrote about, some sexual experience and some theft and things, that I had so much shame attached to. And I thought, okay, I need to write about it because I promised myself this is what needs to be done, following my intuition. And the book came out in March. And I have had so many people contact me about this book and how they can relate, because basically I write about physical health. I write about body image. I write about money. I write about relationships. I write about sexuality. And so those are the 5 things that everyone, those are the main things in our life that we struggle with, and so I'm getting all these messages, mostly from women, but even a few men who have said, oh my gosh, I can so relate. And I've had so many aha moments. And to say that I felt vulnerable about this book coming out is an understatement. And I am so happy that I did, because my higher self has a perspective that is a gazillion times greater than my ego self, right? And so on top of this surrender practice, when you clear away all of the blockages, you start to be more in tune with your higher self. And so I highly recommend for people to start to listen and trust that intuition and allow yourself to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where the growth is. It takes courage, but that is where growth is.
Absolutely. At the edge of our comfort zone, right? That's where transformation lies.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who says, well, okay, I'm in, but I still am not ready to surrender my need for my, Western medicine approach or my antibiotics or my chemotherapy? Is it possible to have it both ways?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. You can have it any way you want. The thing is, if you want, it's the whole, the placebo effect, right? And so for me, I knew Western medicine wasn't the answer. And so if I had, when I told the surgeon, I'm not going to have surgery, he spent half an hour on me using the fear factor. If I had buckled and said, all right, I'm going to do this, it wouldn't have worked, because I had so much resistance, right? And so I'm not saying to anybody not to have surgery or not to have chemo. Do what feels right to you. But if you feel any doubt, any resistance at all, any judgments at all, surrender that, so that you are at peace with your decision. And from that place of peace, you're able to receive. But if there's doubt, you're not able to receive any healing. And that's what I realized was, I had done a year and a half of, I was doing colonics and enemas, and I was in a sauna bed every single day, and I was getting vitamin C through IV and glutathione and chelation, and I was doing liver cleansing, and I had all of these special diets and green juices, and you name it, I did it. I took 37 different kinds of supplements, and nothing worked. Literally everything just flushed down the toilet, because I wasn't able to receive, because I was in this perpetual state of fear, which essentially, when you're in fear, you're in a state of survival. And when you're in a state of survival, all the energy is in your limbs and all your systems are compromised. So in other words, my immune system wasn't properly working, my digestive system, my metabolism, hormonal system, because my hormones were all out of whack. Everything was being compromised. And so everything that I did was for naught, until I surrendered, until I let go of all of the tension, all of the fear and the anger, and I was able to receive. I was at the same vibration as the inner healer. So yes, surrendering is really about being okay with your choices. And then if you have any doubts, be okay with the doubts, right? The doubt is the vibration down here, being okay with it, being in allowance of it, acknowledging the doubt, because that's really what it is as children, we feel unacknowledged. Even as adults, we feel unacknowledged. And so in a surrender practice, you're acknowledging yourself, the child within you, right? You're acknowledging the ego. And which takes me then to, I used to think that I had to kick the ego to the curb and stomp it to death, right? And then in the surrender practice, I realized the ego is my friend. The ego is a very important part of who we are. It makes sure that we don't run across the street when there's a bunch of cars coming. It makes sure that we show up on time at work and we pay the bills and all of that. And so it's about embracing the ego, but it's also about making sure that the ego is not in the driver's seat, putting the ego in the back seat or in the trunk, and put your higher self in the driver's seat. And so that you are living in a state of peace and allowance, and you're not reacting. Because when you are in this state up here, this vibration up here, and you are at peace with the situation, then all action that comes from that place is inspired action. But if your vibration is down here and you're feeling fear or anger or doubt, then you're reacting from that place of fear, right? And so it's about first surrendering and then acting.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what would you say to someone who might be listening who's thinking, well, walking around in bliss all day, just flicking off a few mosquitoes that show up, and transmuting them instantly, that all sounds great, but like I'm so far from that, and I don't even know, like I can't even get clear on the first step. Like, what's the first step someone might take in the direction of bliss?
Awareness. Absolutely. Every single day, be aware as much as you can be. The biggest challenge is remembering to be aware, right? And the minute you become aware of a thought, of an emotion, of a reaction, it's a good idea to write that down, and you start to see patterns, and you can jot it down in your notes on your phone or whatever, and it can just be short little notes. And be aware without judging, because that awareness is the higher vibration, right? But if you become aware and then you judge it, well, then you've just jumped right back down into the ego vibration, because that judging is a low vibration. So just be aware without needing it to be gone, without needing anything to be changed. Just be aware. Be the witness, with kindness, with love, with compassion, with understanding, with peace and patience. It takes patience. And this was something, I have never been a patient person in the past. And I was thinking, to myself, like, oh my God, I've dealt with that already. Whatever came up, like, haven't I dealt with that like years ago? And are you kidding me? This is coming up again. It's okay. It's okay. I love you. It's okay. And this is yet another layer, right? And so keep embracing it. And even still, so I can give you an example. I've been, I'm in bliss a lot. And then there's moments that I'm not in bliss, which is okay too, because I've also surrendered the need to be in bliss all the time. And so I certainly have my moments of, and so about 2 weeks ago, I struggled with an eating disorder, and for decades, and actually didn't heal until only a couple of years ago, when I actually healed the underlying issues of why I was bulimic in the first place. And that issue is that my parents were both incredibly judgmental towards people who carried extra weight. And coming from the Netherlands, where obesity was basically non-existent in the 70s and 80s, we come to Canada, where it was significantly higher, and the judgments, they were harsh. And so as a young child, as a 13-year-old, I made this conclusion in my head: if you gain weight, you're not lovable. You're not worthy. And I go to university at the age of 18. I pack on the freshman 15. By Christmas time, I come home at Christmas time, and my parents just kind of make a couple of casual comments about it. And I didn't realize this at the time, because this all happens subconscious, but I learned all of this in my surrender practice. I just started feeling all of this fear of, oh my God, I need to lose this weight because I'm not lovable anymore. And so then I went back to university and I became bulimic, and it lasted for 20 years. And then I stopped the bulimia when I was diagnosed with cancer the first time in 2007. And I'm like, okay, I'm cured. I'm not bulimic anymore. I'm cured. And then it was in 2013 when I did a retreat with plant medicine, with ayahuasca. And no one had ever caught me. No one had ever caught me. So it was a deep, dark secret, this bulimia. And my husband didn't even know. And in ceremony, I was told, talk about it. Let that secret go. Because there was so much shame and so much fear attached. So I started talking about it. And so I thought, okay, I'm healed. I'm not bulimic anymore, and it's no longer a secret. And then a year and a half, 2 years ago, I got, and realized, oh, I've never actually dealt with why I was bulimic in the first place. Where did that stem? What was the root cause? And so it literally was 30 years of me, learning to love myself. Because people with eating disorders, there's a lot of self-hatred there. And there is no unconditional love, none whatsoever. So I was a pressure cooker, big time. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing. And I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I know there are going to be people who are thinking, wow, I want what she's having and I want to learn it from her. How can people work with you if they want to? What's the best way?
So I have a website. It's called Inner Health Outer Wealth Coaching.com. And so they can reach me that way. They can find me on Facebook, Jayka Duncan. I have a book, as I mentioned. Can I show the book?
Yeah, let's see that book.
There it is. Is it showing the mirror image though?
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. So Healed by Cancer. It's available on Amazon. I would recommend, there are a gazillion books on Amazon about cancer. If you type in my name, there are only 5 Jaykas on Amazon. So it's really easy to find. Type in my name, Jayka Duncan, and it is in paperback as well as Kindle version. And it's available on Amazon everywhere in the world.
Beautiful.
And yes, and my website is where I have my blog is on the website. I co-host a podcast. It's called Two Pals in a Pod, but the link is also on my website. I have a YouTube channel called Jayka Duncan, and so I'm kind of all over the place. Instagram, yes. So I would love for people to reach out and just to say hello. And I'm passionate about teaching people how to surrender, because I have learned firsthand how beautiful life is, how beautiful, really, truly, like this is heaven. This is heaven on earth. This surrendered state of bliss is, it's the ticket to freedom. Freedom from yourself, right? It's about getting out of your own way and all of those limiting beliefs and finding your true essence and connecting with that.
Beautiful. Well, it's been so wonderful connecting with your true essence today. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Kristin, for offering this platform. I'm thrilled and honored to be part of it.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.